What's up, guys? It's Patricia from TarantulaHeaven.com. I have Spidey right here. She is a Chilean rose hair in the big tank. And then in this little enclosure, we have my Arizona blonde sling named Blinky, who is currently tunneling, so you're not going to see them very much today. But anyway, so we're filming from my bedroom because the spiders are in my bedroom for the winter, and I don't really like moving them around the house too much, especially Spidey since her tank is so big and she really hates any movement. So I'd like to just move her as little as possible. So I'm going to be filming here for a little while. Anyway, today I want to talk about my number one tip for new tarantula owners. There are a lot of really important tips that new tarantula owners need to know when they first get into a tarantula or are thinking about getting into tarantulas. However, I don't see this one talked about too much, so I wanted to bring it up. And if you're new here, I put out tarantula videos every single week, whether it's about tarantula facts, tarantula tips, observations about tarantulas, weird things that I find out about tarantulas, or just funny things that I've seen my tarantulas do. But this tip is based on my own experience. So if you are into that, you can subscribe below or subscribe to my Patreon for early access to these videos. Anyway, moving on. So getting a new tarantula can be kind of stressful. There's a lot of things to think about. There's just a lot of things that you need to know to begin with. But this is something that I continually get asked by new tarantula owners, so I think it's important to talk about. I think there's one particular piece of information that is left out a lot, and not intentionally, but I think it's just something that more experienced owners tend to just come into in the hobby, but they don't really share too often. But I think that this bit of advice will help you transition into becoming a new tarantula owner much more easily. So usually the scenario is that someone has gotten a new tarantula and this thing will not eat. It's acting weird, or at least what they perceive as weird. It won't do anything, or it's acting erratic. It is running all over the tank and it's acting defensive, it's trying to bite them, all these different things. So they're just kind of freaking out, and that's when they usually reach out to me, which I love. That is totally fine. Send me your questions, I don't mind at all. But I can understand that for them, it's a period of very high anxiety for them where they don't really know what their tarantula needs. They freak out that they're doing something wrong or that there's something wrong with their tarantula, and they're just feeling really, really chaotic and anxious. So I think that my number one tip for new tarantula owners is when you get your tarantula home and at least in its new enclosure, my number one tip is to let your tarantula rest and leave them alone. I know that is not a fun answer. I know that that makes you feel even more helpless, but that's probably what your tarantula needs you to do. And this was the case for me, but when I first got Spidey, who was my first tarantula, I was so excited. I wanted to handle her right away, which was a terrible idea. Don't do that. I wanted to see her eat. I wanted to see her do all sorts of stuff. But the truth of the matter was that she was not ready. She had just been taken from her environment at the pet store and she had a car ride, and then she was put into this new enclosure, which was totally new. She did not want to be bothered. She wasn't in the mood to eat. She wasn't in the mood to be handled. She was freaking out. And I think that's how you need to think about your own tarantula's experience, is what the spider had to go through in order to get to its new home and its new surroundings. It is very normal for your tarantula to not have an appetite for several days after being moved or put into a new enclosure, or even after you've cleaned the tank or rehoused them. It's very normal for them to also be more defensive, more agitated because they're stressed out. It's also very popular for them to either be walking around the tank, gain a sense of their surroundings, or to even just like close into themselves because they're scared. I mean, thinking about how this whole experience of moving into a new enclosure, or even getting a new enclosure that's been cleaned after they've spent so much time webbing and getting accustomed to their home and designing their home, can be for like such a small, fragile creature who not only can't really see, but it can't really hear, doesn't have ears, and it has a very limited senses. Not to mention, it's extremely sensitive to any vibration or any movement. So imagine what a tarantula might be going through. And that's why it's a really good idea to just leave them alone after they've been into a new surrounding or even just into a new enclosure. So I hope that's somewhat comforting, that it is very normal for your tarantula not to want to eat or to just behave a little bit different when different than you expect them to once they've gotten into a new enclosure or been moved or gotten their tank cleaned. Spidey, even when she's just having a tank cleaning, or I've put some new decor item in her tank that created a big change, she will not want to eat for days, and she'll just act a little funny. But that's normal for her, and a lot of tarantula owners say that's normal for their spiders too. Tarantulas are really sensitive, very anxious creatures, so anytime there's something that's thrown off in their environment, they kind of go through this adjustment period where they're just thrown off. And the really important thing to know is that it's okay if your tarantula doesn't eat for a few days. Tarantulas are very hardy and they don't need to eat as often as cats or dogs or any of those pets. Tarantulas will be fine if you don't feed them for a few days. So it's totally okay for them to go through this adjustment period until they're feeling more comfortable. And you might think that there's something wrong with your tarantula because you have a friend who had a tarantula who ate right away, or something like that, but every tarantula is different. They all have different temperaments, and some tarantula just get stressed out more than others, or they're less hungry than others. So as long as your tarantula is provided with water, which they will drink whether in your presence or not, it's okay if they don't have food for a few days. You can give them time to just get acclimated to their environment. So you can definitely watch them from a distance, but please do not try handling your tarantula or pushing them to eat when they have just gotten home. So that's what I think is the most important thing for beginners to know, is just that all of that is normal, especially if it's just changed environments. And so I hope that that at least helps you manage your own anxiety when going through that, because I know that it can be really hard when you get a new pet at home and you think they're acting weird and you're just unfamiliar with this animal and you don't know what to do. But I assure you that more times than not, that's totally normal. And in a few days or a week, your tarantula will be acting a little more calm, maybe eating again. So just provide them with water and a safe environment and you'll be good. And if you would like more tips about how to make your tarantula more comfortable, you can check out my blog post, which I'll link to below. And I also have a great video on this too, which I will also link to. So I hope that was useful to you, especially the newer tarantula owners who have gone through this process and still don't really know what happened, or if you're getting a tarantula, and I hope that this does help you out. And if you guys have any other tips for the more experienced owners, any other tips that you would give to new tarantula owners, definitely leave them in the comments, because I see that you guys really are active in the comments and you do really learn from each other. So I love that about this channel and this community. So thank you so much for that, guys. And if you're interested in more complete tarantula care, you can definitely purchase my tarantula guide, which I'll leave a link to in the description. That's very, very good for beginners. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you next week. Bye bye. Have a great one.